All right, I think we are going to have a small group today. So we're happy you joined us. My name is Tiffany Neal. I'm the Deputy Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction at the State Department of Education. And before we get too far down the road, we wanted to let you know that we are going to record this session, as we've heard from many educators who are starting back to school this week that they would like to have a recording of this. So I just wanted to make everyone aware before we started that it will be recorded and made available for anyone who was unable to attend today, or for you to come back and take a second listen if you like, if you missed out on anything. So you'll also see on the screen, there's a bit.ly link that you can enter into your own web browser, and you can then have access to the slides from today's presentation. And we also have it shared in the chat box, which we'll talk about that feature in just a moment. So very happy to have you today to talk a little more about curriculum and instruction resources and guidance for the 2020-21 school year. So today we just want to follow a few norms. If you'll introduce yourself in the chat box, include your district, grade level, subject area, and make sure you are muted today, unless you'd like to unmute and speak on the call. That'll help us with some of the feedback issues that happen with virtual meetings. If you'll turn on your camera, as we mentioned, so we could see you, we'd appreciate it, but we understand if you can't. And post any questions that you have as we move along in the chat box. We'll make sure and attend to all of those. And we hope that you will participate. And if there is something that we can help you better understand, we want to make sure we do that today. So we want to give you a little orientation to Zoom if you've never had a chance to be in a Zoom meeting before. And Heather is going to share with us a little bit more about that.
Hi everyone. Zoom has some really great features that can kind of make it a little more interactive as we are here today together. So the main one that we're going to be using this afternoon is the chat box. And so whether you are on a computer or a phone or an iPad, you'll find the chat box down at the bottom of your screen. It will either be with the little bubble where it says chat, or you will look for the 3 dots that say more. And when you click on more, the chat box will be an option there. So whenever you hear things are in chat, that's kind of what we're mentioning there. There are a couple other features that we're just not going to use today. You don't have to worry about renaming yourself, but there are some other buttons, like you can raise your hand, or again, you can unmute and that kind of thing. But really the chat feature is what we're going to be focusing on today.
Thank you, Heather. And just so you know who all from the State Department of Education is on the call today helping you out. We have Deb Wade, who's our Director of Elementary Education. And Deb is waving to us there in the Brady Bunch tile box. We have Heather, who just spoke, who's our Director of Science and Engineering Education. We have Susan Kirk, who's our Elementary Math Director. Susan's waving at us there. Myself, and we have Lauren Jinks-Jones, who's our Director of Early Childhood Education. And then we have Brenda Chapman, who's our Director of Social Studies Education. This is the team that really supports elementary education in our state. And you have all of our contact information in the slide deck if you would like to reach out to us at any time. So what are we here to share with you today? We have been working very hard at the State Department of Education to develop some guidance, documents, and resources specific to supporting you and your schools with launching and carrying out instruction this year, in particular with the various instructional modes that perhaps you will have to utilize to support students this year, both in person, possibly blended, and fully distance, which can include remote, virtual, or remote non-virtual. So the documents are designed to support you in planning that instruction today. And specifically, we're going to go over the instructional support guidance for grades 1 and 2. But we do have documents for all of these areas and grade band levels that are now available on our State Department of Education website for COVID instruction. And I'm sure someone from our team is going to share a link to that main page in the chat box so you can have access to it. It is also linked later on in the presentation. Again, if you go to that website, you'll see all of the documents that you see listed on the screen here today. In the Return to Learn Launching Instruction Guidance, specifically geared towards speaking to classroom teachers, as well as those leaders that support classroom teachers. For every document, you'll see pretty much the same sections of information, guidance, and support. So we have in the documents a lead out with questions to consider while planning for instruction. And the questions are all designed around these categories that you see under that title here in the table of contents. So we do have support for how you think about standards and pacing, effective instructional routines, blended or distance learning, classroom assessment, social and emotional well-being, equity and inclusion. We also have sections devoted to supporting you in thinking through safety considerations for the specific grade, band, or discipline that you're focused on. And then last, we talk a little bit about the ongoing support that we are looking to provide throughout the rest of the year, as well as contact information for the folks that are on the call today. So we're going to go over each of the sections in the document and share a few highlights so you might be enticed to go and take a look after our call today more fully into those documents. So the first section you'll see in the guidance document is around standards and pacing. And it really provides you an opportunity to think about what content and skills for grades 1 and 2 should you prioritize or focus on. What we do share in the document that we believe is very important is that we do want educators and schools to prioritize grade level learning and then provide those scaffolds as needed for any unfinished learning that may have occurred in this spring. But the primary focus is to get to on grade level learning, and then as students need support for that, then move into supporting them with scaffolds, as opposed to potentially spending a tremendous amount of time on teaching or reteaching from last year. One of the things we provide in this section is a way to think about how to understand the learning goals of the standards deeply so that you can begin to think about where are those areas that students may have had unfinished learning from last year, and how might we support them during on-grade level learning this year. We also give some advice about eliminating or replacing ill-aligned lessons, curriculum, or instruction. So we get that question a lot. What should we focus on this year, knowing that we may not have as much time as we'd like because of different instructional delivery models, or we may be trying to then incorporate some of the unfinished learning in from last year. So we say start with really analyzing what your grade level learning goals are. Take a look at your existing curriculum and the lessons that you're planning for the year. And if any of those are less than aligned to the standards, maybe they actually attend to a grade level above you or below you, then we would recommend to really pay attention to that and eliminate anything that is not well aligned. We also give advice for bundling or grouping standards so that you might have a lesson that covers multiple standards, let's say for English language arts, or perhaps bundling in English language arts and social studies together to teach a lesson in a way that provides you sort of a little more opportunity to cover more through that bundling. So another area in the document that we provide for grades 1 and 2 is general guidance for each discipline. And Susan's going to share with you a little bit about what you can expect in that section of the document.
Okay, so if you click on the grade 1 and grade 2 in the document, you'll see that it takes you to first grade and second grade learning progressions in the Oklahoma Math Curriculum Frameworks. And the learning progressions are broken down into units. The units are 5 or 6 units per grade level, and they offer approximate time frames, which can be a really helpful guideline in helping you know how long to cover a section so that you can cover all of the standards for the year. Each unit begins with a driving question, followed by some subsequent questions that help us to guide students in their understanding and to make connections that will help the students develop their number sense, and it also helps students make connections from step-by-step procedural knowledge to the deeper understanding of the topic and the relationship of math with the real world. Also in those learning progressions, you're going to find a lot of technology resources and ideas for developing lessons. And we already have bundled standards for you within math standards to help you kind of put them together and help them interact. And there are key resources, which include lessons and assessments. And there also is a culminating unit, a closure, which covers the initial topic, and then it suggests maybe some remediation strategies if we have students who are still struggling. So it covers over each major unit in the learning progression. Each of these resources is available. I think you'll find those pretty helpful. Also in the links there is a what to expect for first grade and second grade, and it's for families. It helps families recognize what their students should be doing and how they can support their students at home. And we know if we go into distant learning that we're going to have to work on keeping that community of learners strong so we can all work to support our students through the year.
Thank you so much, Susan. And I do want to point out in this section of the guidance document, for each of our subject areas of English language arts, math, social studies, and science, what we've tried to do is to give you the best information and resources we can to help you think about what to focus on and the resources to help you think about supporting instruction in those areas. So while Susan talked specifically about what's provided for math, you'll also see it's available for English language arts and science and social studies in this section of the document. Oops. In addition to that section of the document, we have another section which we hope helps you think about effective instructional routines for grades 1 and 2. It's probably not new for you when you see this guidance in the document, but we try to think about what's an effective instructional routine, regardless if you are maybe teaching towards learning goals for English language arts, mathematics, science, or social studies. So we've coalesced what we believe are these steps in an effective instructional routine or cycle of learning, which starts with engaging with a hook, explaining the purpose of what the learning will be for your students, introducing information or providing an investigation for students, guided practice, opportunities to check for understanding, and then independent practice for the student. And you might ask why we are giving advice on sort of a common instructional routine for grades 1 and 2. We thought this might be valuable for you to think about because we understand that for many of you, you will be designing both in-person learning experiences and probably remote learning experiences. And the idea is if you have a common instructional routine that you're focused on, then it can create consistency for you in planning, but also, and maybe more importantly, it provides consistency for students who may be moving between in-person and remote learning. It gives sort of that feeling of, I know what to expect and what comes next. And in a year where so much will be inconsistent for students and for yourselves, this might be a really easy way to create some consistency for you and your students. So in that section, you'll see some examples here. And I believe Brenda's going to talk with us a little bit about an example of how we've structured these instructional routines for you.
So when you actually get into the document, you're going to see that each one of those parts of the routine that Tiffany was talking about is going to be in the chart, and you're going to have an in-person side and you're going to have a distance learning side. So what you can see here is our first part of engage. And what we want to think about is something that the students, being purposeful, something that the students are going to be engaged with this topic about. So we might have a story or a short story that will make them interested in our topic. We might have a little video clip. We might have a picture or an artifact, and we might have a big idea question that we're giving them so they can kind of work with that and think about it and get really interested in our topic so that you can keep on going through your instructional routine. So for instance, if you see here, we've got a couple, and so does the sun stay in the same spot all day? That's a pretty interesting question that they might want to tackle, and they might have some ideas for starting that out. And then you can kind of go through the rest of your cycle. So if you notice in person, the things you would do in your class and purposely thinking of all those literacy and math connections to go with social studies and science. And then if you notice on the right, you know, what happens if you have asynchronous learning with the kids at home and they're having to look at this on some sort of digital platform, or synchronously, maybe they could have some think time and their caregiver could maybe prompt them while they're at home. So some things for you to think about. And like I said, this chart will have each section and kind of some ideas to go through that, but purposely thinking about how you can work a little smarter in pulling all of those together.
Thanks so much, Brenda, for that. Again, that chart, we think we've already heard some really great feedback from that, as teachers can see a common instructional routine, an example for in-person, and then how you would shift for distance. We also have another chart in the document that helps you think about shifting from in-person to distance, not specific to a subject area or an instructional routine, but in general, how the class structure, so to speak, might look and feel a little bit different. So in this chart, for example, one of the things we point out for in-person learning is that students can experience explicit instruction, independent or group work, and one-on-one support during daily class periods. That's probably pretty common for traditional schooling. However, when you move to a distance learning setting, there's still some commonalities. There can be time for explicit instruction, again, and time for independent and or group work, and one-on-one support through flexible scheduling. And that's really the key. It's all about how you schedule the remote learning opportunities for real time with the teacher and other students instruction, and then that independent time as well. We also provide a suggestion for how you might think about structuring your distance learning time for the week. Here we say synchronous learning may occur with smaller whole groups, 1 to 2 times a day for 15 to 20 minutes, or through some other version of flexible scheduling that's determined by you and your district. But we would encourage, especially at these grades, an intentional effort for daily independent reading. We say independent, but that is likely going to be supported with family members and caregivers at home or in other settings. We also have provided another chart. We really enjoyed charts for this guidance document, but this chart is a little bit different, and Lauren's going to talk about this chart, which provides you just an example of how you might structure your given day, or you could think about it for the week as well. So Lauren, will you tell us a little bit more about this chart and what it offers folks?
Yeah, so in this chart, we know that there are some commonalities in terms of what are happening in first and second grade classrooms. We know in general there's going to be some kind of, like the example here, phonics or phonological awareness instruction. There's going to be math. There's going to be science and social studies. There's going to be writing. There's going to be small groups, and even things like recess. So we wanted to think about, like, what are those things? Like, what makes those things appropriate and effective in a classroom? And then also think about, now that we need to potentially switch that to a distance learning environment, what is that actually going to look like? What are my options there to actually provide those portions of the day to students who are not learning at school, who are learning at home? So in the options for distance learning, there's a number of different things that you could choose from if you had to do that. Some of them are synchronous, meaning that you're online with students and it gives you some ideas there. Some of them are asynchronous, where you're providing students something to do digitally and they're doing it on their own. And some of them are really supported by families and caregivers, that they have to kind of step into the role of teacher in that. And it kind of walks you through what each of those could look like for the different parts of day, and will allow you to think most effectively about each individual portion and making it the best that it can be for students while they're at home.
Thanks, Lauren. And this chart even has some suggestions for that time that's normally set aside for your morning routines with students, and how you might do that in a distance learning setting. So certainly something we hope that is valuable to you as you think about structuring this time with students, both in person and through distance learning opportunities. We also have an entirely different document that is supplemental to both grades 1 and 2, 3 and 5, and then our pre-K and K guidance documents. And this is going to be a document that focuses solely on K through 3 foundational literacy and is connected to our Reading Sufficiency Act. So Deb, will you share with us a little bit about the highlights of this document, please?
Absolutely. So we wanted to make sure that we gave some special attention to this because we know that this is a huge part of instruction in grades 1 and 2. So the document, and the link is there, it starts with basically the same thing that we've had in the other documents. What does instruction look like? What does literacy instruction look like? And so it walks through what it means for it to be explicit and systematic and sequential, because we want students to be on grade level, but we also want to make sure we're addressing and building on those skills that need to happen before a new skill can be taught. So that's a big part of it, as well as just the focus on core instruction, whether that occurs in whole group or small group or partnered or independent, that we want to make sure that we're focusing on that core instruction first and foremost. So we want to make sure that our small group needs happen with similarities within those students' skills, and we want to make sure we're also using those areas for scaffolding. And that independent work is where we really tailor instruction to meet student needs where they're at. So all of that is addressed in that document. And then it moves to, you can see on the screen, it shows you what instruction can look like online and some things that happen and some slight shifts as they move from kindergarten and first grade into second and then beyond. So the division of time as far as the daily reading instruction time is also in there for in-person and distance learning. It gives some examples of what word work might be like, language elements, as well as reading comprehension. And then this slide again shows us what distance or blended learning looks like, and it has some additional resources, and it's very explicit in showing where some things need to happen, that maybe some things go away when they enter second or third grade, but only if those skills have been accomplished and hopefully mastered. The remainder of the document looks at some assessments, the universal screeners, diagnostic assessments, how those take place, how often they take place, speaks to multi-tiered systems of support. So it goes into some detail about tier 1, 2, and 3 instruction and what that might look like virtually. It also talks about interventions and progress monitoring. And I think that these are all things that are, people have asked questions about, and Melissa did her absolute best to try to include all of those pertinent things in the document. And probably the most important piece of information I can share about this is that Melissa will be sharing this document out next Tuesday at 2 o'clock. And if you are wanting to have a more in-depth look at this, I would strongly encourage everybody to attend next Tuesday.
Thanks so much, Deb. And actually, the document is available now. You can get to it through the COVID instruction page, which has been linked in the chat. And my guess is that someone from our team will also share the direct link momentarily in the chat box to this document. But again, if you are looking for how to accomplish early reading instruction this year, this document titled Return to Learn, Supporting or Launching Instruction for Foundational Literacy has everything in it that you could possibly want to have access to support you with that. Both the foundational literacy document and the grades 1 and 2 document that we are focusing on today have a slew of resources for you as a teacher to support early reading instruction, both in person and through distance learning. All right, we're going to move along, and I should mention we're going to have set aside time for questions and answers at the end of our presentation today, but feel free to add any questions that you might have to the chat box, and we'll make sure and get to those in just a moment. Lauren, will you share with us a little bit about some of the guidance we provide that speaks specifically to the unique needs of grades 1 and 2 teachers to connect with family members and caregivers at this time?
Yeah, absolutely. So the great thing about this document is that the need for families to be partners in student learning is all throughout this document. It's not necessarily just living in one section, but we did want to take some time to actually point out some things that we can be thinking about and be at the front of our minds, because we know that's going to be such an important part. And you all actually know that better than anyone, because you were thrown into distance learning in the spring, and have already been tasked with doing that. And so you all are actually already the experts at this. But just wanted to bring it back to the forefront and bring it back to the front of your minds as you're considering your plans for this year. So when we think about bringing parents into the conversation and making sure that they have a seat at the table when we're talking about their students' education, it really is an issue of equity. If we're including their voice, if we're giving them choice in how they're participating in education, and able to bring all of the information that they know about their student to us, that helps us be better teachers for their students, and that's a more equitable experience for them. Versus if we're making assumptions about what they want or what they need. I know I have definitely heard those conversations and maybe even been part of them in the past, where someone's telling me, oh, like that family may not show up to this, or may have preconceived notions that they're passing on to me, that make it a less equitable experience for my student, because I may have some internalized things already about them when they're walking through the door or walking into my Zoom classroom. So we want to make sure that we're not making those assumptions, and we're thinking about caregivers and those families as really, really essential to part of the instructional experience for students. With that, we know there's a couple of things that we want to really focus on, some keys to success that are going to make this actually happen. So the first thing is communication. It's all about communication and making sure that those lines are open. You all are going to need to be providing guidance to families and caregivers about what learning looks like if they're learning at home. Whether or not they're learning at home, you want them to be part of the learning experience for students. So you're going to actually have to give that guidance. Now, the great thing is that the State Department of Education has these wonderful family guides available for first and second grade in ELA, math, science, and social studies that kind of let parents know what to expect, what their students are going to need to know, and give them tips on how to support their students in that kind of learning. So those are ready to go and share with families as you're kind of thinking about how to bring them into the conversation. You also want to make sure that you're communicating really clearly expectations, even the content of the material that students are going to be learning. There is a chance that our families may need to learn how to teach their students something. So you can make videos or share resources that speak directly to families in that way. Even things like how to use the digital tools. I think there's some assumption that adults will know how to use them, but they've never used them before either. So actually creating communication directed towards that for families can be really helpful. Another thing with communication is we want to allow for feedback too. It's not just about our communication to families, but also how they're able to communicate back to us. Are we checking in with them and making sure that everything is working for them, and that we're being responsive to their needs? The last thing with specifically thinking about families and caregivers is flexibility. It's really easy. I know I'm a very type A person and want to have a plan and system for how I'm going to do something, but that's probably not going to work for every single family that I have in my classroom. So being able to be flexible in the ways that we're communicating. For some students, that might be Zoom. For some students, it may make more sense to do text messages and remind. For some of them, there's like good chunks of time early in the day, or maybe they need stuff a little later in the afternoon. And so being able to be I totally lost my word, flexible and responsive, there we go, to our families is just a really essential part of that kind of communication with them.
Thanks, Lauren. And we do have a direct link to the website to retrieve all of the family guides. And Susan, thank you so much for pointing out that the family guides are provided both in English and in Spanish. So it's a great thing to share with your families at the beginning of the year so that they can think about what to expect for their student learning, and also ways that they can support them with that learning at home. So There's another document we want to share with you that we hope will be helpful. So an additional document we've created to support teachers at all grade levels around digital tool usage is our document called Return to Learn, Launching Instruction with Digital Tools. And again, I believe one of our team members will put a direct link to that in the chat. However, you can also get to it on the same COVID instruction website with all of the other guidance documents. Now, this particular document is unique in that it really provides guidance on digital tools around these 4 principles. So how do you select appropriate digital tools and implement them with care? How do you create clear and effective communication strategies for both students and families and caregivers with those tools? How do you build and maintain a community in a digital or distance learning setting that's digitally based? And how do you empower students to have some choice in their learning and the way that they're sharing their artifacts or their understandings back to you as the teacher in these digital situations or digital settings? So what you're going to see is that through the document, we have a few scenarios that are somewhat like vignettes. I'll talk about those in a moment. And we have tools. So we link directly to tutorials regarding different tools that might be helpful for you to use in a digital setting as first and second grade teachers, and then a slew of resources as well. Here's an example of one of the scenarios or the vignettes that we provide, and we hope what these help you think about as you read them is that this might be a situation that you find yourself in this year, or your students find themselves in this year, or families and caregivers find themselves in this year. For each scenario, we provide a few reflection questions that might help you think about some ways to improve the way you're thinking about launching instruction with digital tools that would mitigate maybe some of the struggles that you see in the scenario. But there are also scenarios that showcase some pretty highly effectively operating classes who are in fully digital distance settings. So again, we hope those scenarios are helpful to you. One other thing I'll point out on this document is if you're familiar with Universal Designs for Learning, UDL, which support students, differentiation for students at all levels in their learning, the UDL principles are outlined in the document, and you can see, for example, here, there's a whole section on providing multiple means of engagement, which is one of the 4 UDL principles. And you can see the checkpoints provided by UDL as ways to provide multiple means of engagement. And then on the far right side, on that column, what we've done is we've showcased digital tools and strategies to help you attend to that checkpoint for that universal design principle. You will also see in the main guidance document for grades 1 and 2, now we're out of the digital tool guidance and back to grades 1 and 2, you will also see there's a section that helps you think about classroom assessments. Now we showcased in the document, in the guidance document already, that effective instructional routine. And we talk about in this classroom assessment section how to effectively use those different points in your instructional routine to really understand where students are at in their learning, more so than implementing a slew of additional classroom assessments, to really leverage those experiences that you're already providing in the instructional routine as your classroom assessments to know where students are at. And Heather's going to talk to us about 2 more sections that really round out the guidance for grades 1 and 2, starting with what you probably are all already focusing on, which is social emotional learning and well-being supports. So Heather, if you'll share with us a little bit about these 2 sections.
Yes, so we know that we are teaching in an unknown environment, and just a lot of additional stress and things that can affect our classroom and our students and our students' families. And so we want to make sure that we're, of course, thinking about social emotional learning and well-being of not only our students, but of ourselves and of our students' families. So within this document, there are several resources to kind of help with how do I integrate that in grades 1 and 2. For example, like one of the things, if you're just checking in with how are students feeling, they can draw pictures, right, of their emotions and to make those kinds of connections about what's going on. Even talking about like taking turns during class discussions and discussing like how they're feeling and like working back and forth together with each other. Thinking about yourself as well, especially if you are fully virtual or working on distance learning, setting up some new routines. It's amazing how quickly 5 hours pass when you're working in front of a computer, or you move into the evening really quickly without realizing that time has passed. So kind of setting up some new routines of like, how do I turn off work? How do I set up those reminders, since I don't have like my phone going off for rotations in the classroom or anything like that, right? It's just you and the computer. So thinking about like taking care of yourself as well during this time. And also, how do we support our students with chronic stress? There are a lot of really fabulous resources in this section with tips for both you, your instruction, and for families. So if you're unsure of what to do with those, of course, like they're all linked in there. And I think that's fabulous. Like there's like a one-stop for social and emotional learning. And then we've touched on this a little bit earlier about equity in our classrooms, and really want to make sure that we have equal access to our students to have opportunities and participation in our classroom. Thinking about how we are communicating with the families so that we are engaging all of our students and not just the ones that have internet access through Zoom or something along those lines. Looking at how we can leverage our families and caregivers as creating a partnership with student learning. Different ways that they can support their students so they don't have to feel like they have to be the knower of all the knowledge and all of these subject areas, and being able to do that. And so showing them that just being supportive and just asking their students questions like, how did this go? And what do you think about this? Those types of resources are also all linked in here. They're also identified in this table. So kind of a comparison of like what is more equitable versus less equitable practices. There's some anti-bias supports in here as well. Some teacher reflection on what is being represented in my classroom, what voices are being heard, who's being included, those kinds of supports. There's just a bunch in here. So hopefully that you guys can go work with APLC or work with some other educators to really delve into this area about how I can actually integrate it within grades 1 and 2. Oops, Tiffany, you're on mute.
Thank you, Heather. Sorry about that, everyone. One of the last sections you'll see in the document is a section that showcases safety considerations. We understand that the grade 1 and 2 classrooms looks completely different than, let's say, the secondary social studies classroom, a high school US history classroom. So what we tried to do was to call out some safety considerations for you related to grade 1 and 2 classrooms. So just a few things we highlighted here. There might be a safety consideration that says create a clean me bucket and have students place materials that need to be cleaned in the bucket. There's some guidance for considerations for centers. Now, obviously, both of these bullets relate to in-person learning. And the third bullet does as well, provide students with their own manipulatives for the year. But also, there's some guidance for safety in the distance learning settings as well, especially if you have students who perhaps you do send home a packet of materials for manipulatives, and how to make sure to attend to safety in those settings when you aren't there to sort of oversee the safety concerns that you would normally have in your own classroom in person. What we do want to say is everything we provided in the safety consideration section really is just that, considerations. We would defer to your district and your leadership for any guidance that they might have first and foremost. However, we hope to give you a few things to think about here As a reminder for now how to think about safety in in-person settings when you are trying to really be mindful of cleaning practices and social distancing, as well as those safety practices for distance learning. And then Brenda's going to share with you a little bit about the upcoming or ongoing support that we hope to offer throughout the rest of the year.
Certainly. So one thing you need to know is that this isn't a one-time meeting and then we're done. We're here to support you. And one of the things we're doing is having monthly virtual meetings every fourth Tuesday at 4:30. And if you subscribe to the ELA newsletter, science, social studies, or math, you will find that link and the password that goes with it, because we don't want anyone to Zoom bomb our meeting. So we make sure that we only give out the link to teachers and the password. And we're going to be able to do deeper dives into this document on certain sections. And I'm going to put up a poll here in just a minute, and you're going to help us decide what those sections might be that you need extra help with. And of course, we want you to be talking with teachers in your building and PLCs as you take some of these topics and do a deeper dive with your PLC. We will be continuing to learn as we go through this together, and so there may be changes to our documents later. That 2.0 means that we're going to learn things as we go, and you're going to learn, we're going to learn, and we're going to add those things as we do that. And once again, there's the link at the bottom to get to that page that has the multiple documents on there that we've been showing you. Also in the document, you're going to find all kinds of other help for you, Twitter places to go and things like that. So we are not leaving you by yourself, and we wanted to make sure that you knew that. Okay, Tiffany, do you want to show something in particular?
Yeah, I think if we could scroll down the document, you may want to close your eyes if you get motion sick, because I'm going to take us to the very bottom of the document very quickly. Because here at the bottom of the document, it will have guidance for what Brenda mentioned, signing up for the newsletter, where you can find out how to get connected to the Zoom meetings that will happen every month, as well as those common days of the month where the meetings will happen. And as Deb mentioned earlier, the reading sufficiency virtual meeting will happen next Tuesday at 2 p.m. And that's where Melissa Algrim, our Director of Reading Sufficiency, will go over the foundational literacy document in much greater detail. I think the key takeaway I'd share with you is when you look through the document, we understand that it's going to feel like a lot of information and a lot of resources. We wouldn't expect necessarily anyone to, tonight after the call, feel like they have to go through everything to prepare for instruction or to add to their instruction if they've already started back to school this week. What we hope you see this document as is a tool you can refer to throughout the year to support you as you run into maybe any changes that you were planning on, or if you're really just looking for some advice in some areas that you know you'd like to strengthen for your classroom, particularly this year. Of course, we would love for you to read through it from start to finish and look at every resource. That's great too, but we also didn't want you to feel like our intent was that you feel like you have to do that before you start your instructional support for students this year. So Brenda, I think you have a poll that you want to share that will give us, as you said, an idea of what people on the call would like to focus on at a subsequent meeting related to different parts of this document.
Okay, so this is going to be interesting because I think this is going to happen to you, that I pulled it up not 1 minute ago and it was ready to launch, and now it says I can't launch it. So if anybody who is a co-host on the call can launch it, it won't let me launch it.
I launched.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Great.
This will never happen to you. Your tech will never fail.
So you should have a poll that's on your screen that you can respond to.
But we need more than 2 people to vote. There we go. Okay.
Yeah. All right, we have a few people who are still voting there. All right, as you're finalizing your votes, I also just wanted to point out there are a slew of things that we didn't have an opportunity to talk about that are provided for you in the guidance document as well. One of those things is how you might think about as a school or a classroom incorporating physical activity, both in person and through distance mechanisms. As a matter of fact, surprise, surprise, we have a whole document, Return to Learn, Launching Instruction for Health and Physical Education, which provides all kinds of ideas for how to accomplish recess through social distancing and how you can really support students who are in remote settings in staying active and healthy and providing that physical activity time. So we think there will be a lot of other things you find in the document that you will hopefully find useful that we didn't get a chance to go over today. And I'm happy to share the results. It looks like effective instructional routines and blended and distance learning are at the top of the list. We kind of had a feeling that that might be the case, but it's always nice to hear from you directly. So we are coming to the close of our formal side of the presentation, but we also wanted to give you an opportunity to just simply ask questions of us today. And I apologize, I think I may be looking at the wrong screen, but we will make it work. So if you would please feel free to ask a question in the chat box and we will do our best to respond to it. And if you would prefer to unmute and ask the question, we're happy to do that as well. And if you would prefer it not be on the video recording, you just let us know and we'll make sure and edit it out. So you feel a little more comfortable with that. Are there any questions you might have for us related to any of the guidance documents, specifically any of the components of grades 1 and 2 that we talked about today? We have a feeling that wait time with littles is a little less than wait times with adults. So we want to provide you that time for any questions you might have. All right, well, I tell you what, we're going to stick around on the call today for anyone who maybe felt they didn't want to ask a question of the whole group. But keep in mind, you have access to our contact information. If you have any follow-up questions, you will also see in the document there's embedded a survey. So at any time you can give us feedback on the information that was provided in the document, or if you have a request for things that you would like to see added. Remember, Brenda said we're going to be doing a version 2.0 as we learn what might best help you all. As well as learning from you about what's working well. So please give us feedback through that survey. And then I think on behalf of our whole team, all we want to really say to you as you leave us and embark on your school year is we understand that you could have all sorts of emotions right now, including just being really excited about getting back with kiddos. And that if there ever was a year of uncertainty, we know this is the year, and we've been sharing around our office that we just have to give ourselves grace as we function this year and give grace to those around us as we're all trying to navigate a new frontier. Please just know that we at the State Department of Education are here to help you in whatever way we can. No email, no phone call is too small. If you have a question, if you need help, we are all here to support you. So thank you very much for spending just a little bit of your valuable time with us today to learn more about these instructional resources that we've put together for you. And again, we're going to stay on the line if you have any questions. If not, thank you again for your time and have a great start to your year. We hope to see you next month on the Grade 1-2 virtual call. Thank you, everyone.